what Trump probably wanted at this stage, which was to declare victory and leave as soon as possible, becomes a lot more difficult.
His dad's just been blown up by Trump. And reports are that his wife was killed.
His
as well.
wife and his son.
And he's been injured, so he is not in the let's do a deal with Trump camp. We know that.
No one can plausibly claim that with the younger Khomeini now in power, this is a victory. It's just not. That doesn't wash. No. So this is on a different level.
This is on a whole new scale. And this is the work of Donald Trump. We've gone from a 4 to 5 day, we'll bully them into submission, and the people will rise up to, oh my God, what's next? That's what's happened in a week.
Well, they want regime change. They want, a complete overhaul in America.
This must be the first known record of regime change, so, a quote, successful regime change, where they've ended up with a guy who's even more hostile than the one they've just changed. Hello and happy Monday.
Happy Monday, one and all.
This is a special because so much is happening, as we guessed it might, Matt.
As we warned.
The world is moving at a rate of knots, an uncomfortable rate of knots, I think one might say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. I was thinking this morning about what I think about what has happened so far, and I was reminded of that old joke about the country bumpkin who's asked by a tourist directions, and the guy says, well, I wouldn't start here, right? And my general feeling about the war so far is I wouldn't start here. And literally every hour there's something new. I mean, just literally before logging on, I was watching Ursula von der Leyen giving a speech, which I'd like to read with more care, but and she was saying that Europe can no longer rely on the old rules-based order, which is an amazing thing for a European Commission president to say. I mean, just as a statement. So I guess the big news in the last 24 hours, and it is very significant, is that Mojtaba Khomeini has been named by the wonderfully named Assembly of Experts as the new supreme leader, in succession to his father, who was killed in the first wave of the strikes. And this is it's a strong move in the sense that what you see here is he's not an Ayatollah yet, for a start. It's interesting. So you see religious authority also vying with the power of dynasty, and that position, the supreme leadership, being given a hereditary aspect as well as a theocratic one.
Yeah.
And Trump has already said he's not having this guy. So on all sorts of levels, it's very significant. He's very close to the Revolutionary Guards. He's regarded as having been extremely influential with his aging father in the last few years behind the scenes anyway. But it means that I think what Trump probably wanted at this stage, which was to declare victory and leave as soon as possible, becomes a lot more difficult.
Well, mate, his dad's just been blown up by Trump. And reports are that his wife was killed as well.
His wife and his son.
And he's been injured, so he is not. He's not in the let's do a deal with Trump camp. We know that
100%. And also, Trump is a master of pretending that things. Well, not a master, but he has a habit, shall we say, of calling things a victory when they're self-evidently not. But no one can plausibly claim that with the younger Khomeini now in power, this is a victory. It's just not. That doesn't wash. No. So Trump is stuck for the moment.
I would absolutely love to know what mission accomplished means for Donald Trump, because the stock market is down through the floor. Oil prices are up through the roof. Service personnel are coming back in boxes. All of our allies are getting shelled and droned on a daily basis. They've appointed the most antagonistic and hostile successor you could pick in a country of 90 million people. The civilian population of Iran has, from what we know, and we know very little to be fair, but from what we know, have been cowed by threats from the Revolutionary Guard into not rebelling. So all we seem to have achieved is a state of absolute chaos and tension and and global danger on a level that, I mean, you and I have been sitting here talking about how dangerous Ukraine and Russia is.
Oh, this is on a
I
different
think
level.
this is on a whole new scale, and this is the work of Donald Trump.
So if you take the one piece you mentioned, which is the oil price now going over $100 a barrel, first time since the early days of the Ukraine war, and it's already hitting gas prices in American forecourts, which is it's an important indicator everywhere, but in America, it's up there with the price of eggs.
Yeah,
Americans hate that. And of course, for those with memories, this is already bringing back very difficult memories of the 70s, because there were two, I mean, the 70s and then really the world that followed, the world we now live in, was shaped by two big oil shocks in the 70s. One in 73, 74, which was mainly the consequence of the Yom Kippur War and its aftermath. And then in 79, 80, which was the consequence of the Iranian Revolution. Now, both of those events had massive geopolitical and geoeconomic consequences. And it's true that the oil supply now is more diverse and more complicated, and the economy is more complicated and interlinked. But nonetheless, as we said on a previous pod, the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of all the world's oil supply is closed. And it's no surprise that G7 finance ministers are having an emergency meeting this afternoon to talk about the emergency release of reserves.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to get too far away from the actual kinetic war, but to your point, we're only, 10 days in?
Yeah.
And already we're on the verge of serious global economic upheaval.
Yeah, and does, I mean, as we said on the front cover of, in a rather facetious, flippant way, on the front cover of the New World last week, plan what plan? And it's becoming increasingly obvious, unless there is some ultra plan, and perhaps there is in Donald Trump's head, and we can actually, you've literally just filed a piece which will be going into this week's magazine, which touches on what might be going on inside Donald Trump's head, and it's not irrelevant. But
it's not irrelevant. But
in terms, Matt, of day to day, how this war is unfolding, and we've gone from a 4 to 5 day, we'll bully them into submission, and the people will rise up, to, oh my God, what's next? That's what's happened in a week.
Well, I think things to look out for, and this was always going to happen, but I think it might happen sooner rather than later, is the split between the Israelis and the Americans, because the Israelis want to go all out. They want regime change. They want, a complete overhaul in America. Whereas it's clear from the very confusing, not much is clear, but it's clear from the very confusing things that Trump has said to multiple journalists without any sense of order, that he would have initially at least accepted a sort of Venezuela style arrangement. There's this wonderful, I mean, euphemisms are always so revealing, that they're now talking not in terms of regime change, but regime modification, or my favorite, regime editing, which is such a good, meaningless statement. What it means is that Trump, in his head, I think, the more we look at it, thought that he could do in Iran what he did in Venezuela, that, he put, as he's put Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, in power as a sort of biddable puppet. So far, that seems to be working to his satisfaction. We'll see. That is not going to happen in Iran.
No.
Now, that means that at some point, Trump will want to get out on some spurious basis. But the Israelis don't. And it was interesting, just a little tell, Lindsey Graham, who is the ultra-hawkish, pro-Trump senator for South Carolina, the nemesis of Tucker Carlson. Rarely does an episode of Tucker Carlson go without an attack on Lindsey Graham. Tweeted overnight that Israel was doing a great job, but it needs to exercise caution so that it doesn't damage the oil infrastructure of Iran. Now, the reason that's important is A, Lindsey Graham's close to Trump, and B, for someone as, cosmically neoconservative and hawkish as Lindsey Graham to say, guys, we might need to step back a bit, is very significant.
That is very telling, as you say. So we're left in a position now where the sort of ludicrous nature of this conflict is becoming manifest, and we've still got the dancing fools like Pete Hegseth jumping up and down and talking about flames and fury from the sky. But the reality is that it looks very much like Iran will see this out, at least for as long as it wants to. And we've said from the start, Matt, that Iran doesn't have to win anything. It just needs to survive. It just needs to hang on. It
just needs not to lose.
And this must be the first known record of regime change, so, as a quote, successful regime change, where they've ended up with a guy who's even more hostile than the one they've just changed. I mean, if there was a very good article in The Atlantic not too long ago where they talked about the Ayatollah's son as being really, you know, not just a, you know, a neophyte, but actively part of the regime. And in fact, somebody who was more aggressive to the United States than his father was, which takes some doing.
It's so true. And I think one of the things that's worth bearing in mind is that when there's going to be a change of regime, you know, change in the whole, not just in who's at the top, but in terms of the whole character of the polity. If you go back to the Soviet Union, you need two things really. One is the sort of hollowing out of the ideology, and the second is the sort of arthritis entering the apparat. Now, it's true that there are lots of Iranians who are fed up with theocracy, but it's also true that there are 200,000 heavily armed Revolutionary Guards with their militias who are very much in favor of the theocracy, with an oligarchy of mullahs, a college of cardinals equivalent atop. That remains. And again, that answers the point about the apparat, which is that this is not 1989. It's not even South Africa, you know, and Mandela. You know, there is no, I can't see a partner to deal with. You know, Reza Pahlavi, the Shah's son, has already been ruled out of court, and I understand why, because I think, you know, he's an outsider. He's lived in the West most of his life. Why should Iranians in reality accept him as an interim ruler? So, as you say, we've now got someone who's more hardline. You know, he's kind of like the mirror image of Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who is the you know, the actual ruler, son of the king, but is a modernizer and is deeply, you know, embedded with lots of Western figures, including Trump, to try and make Saudi part of the community of nations. This guy is the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah, and he's motivated like nobody else has ever been motivated before in Iran.
Massive personal motivation.
I was reminded. I mean, it's the analogy is not quite perfect because obviously Iran is on the defensive in this instance. But I was reminded of George W. Bush. His, you know, there was no question that there was a partial motivation in his loathing of Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
Because Saddam Hussein had tried to kill his dad.
Yeah.
Well, this guy's dad is in bits. You know, that's happened.
And his wife and one of his children.
Yeah.
And you know, if reports are correct, he has himself suffered some sort of injury, and I imagine, well, I'm sure, you know, that he will be extremely mobile because you know, he has got a big target on his back. So he has his whole psyche will be different from that of his father, who, by the way, another interesting aspect of this whole story, it's quite clear that after last year's 12-day war, the US-Israeli attacks on the nuclear facilities, Khomeini Senior, now deceased, put in place a series of plans in the event of his death, which explains why, after the initial Israeli and American attacks on the 28th, the Iranian attacks on you know, 9 or 10 nations, let alone, you know, Cyprus and everywhere, were so quickly carried out because the regional commanders already had their orders.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's clear. I mean, I hate to labour the point, but surely, I mean, and what's so confusing about this situation is that the Pentagon must have known that, and I'm not saying that in
I agree.
Surely let's assume they did know that this was
what was going to
happen.
They knew where everyone was going to be literally on that Saturday morning. So I assume their human intelligence is quite good.
But if they priced this kind of reaction in and war gamed it out, as we know that they war game on a regular basis, then all of these consequences are entirely foreseeable. And yet there's no indication that they foresaw them.
No, I think perhaps this is not to excuse it. It's simply one sort of forages around in the mess for something approaching an explanation. They must have assumed wrongly, I think, that the regime would just collapse. In other words, that the protests in January were indeed the beginnings of a sort of fall of the Berlin Wall equivalent, and they just weren't.
But Matt, how many times do we need to see this reality in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan? How many times do we need to see that history does not play out as simply as that? It's astonishing.
No, I mean, if you want to do a regime change, and sometimes, I mean, look, let's acknowledge that there is one core truth in all of this, which doesn't mean this is a correct operation at all, but there will be no peace in the region until the mullahs have gone. Now, the problem is that this operation may have entrenched the mullahs, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's the difficulty is that if and when America leaves this conflict, the situation of the regime will have been massively exacerbated.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to steelman Trump's position a little bit. Maybe he is a gambler. We know he's a gambler.
Yes,
you say so yourself at the end of your great piece this morning, and maybe he's rolled the dice and he's thought, well, it's worth a shot, but I'll extricate myself. We'll be okay, and they'll be contained. The Israelis will contain them, and it'll rumble on. But ultimately, we'll pull out if the gamble fails, and that's that.
It's a massive, what you must never do in warfare ever is underestimate your enemy, ever. I mean, that's kind of 101 stuff.
Yeah.
And I think one of Trump's problem is he sees the world as flat. Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Well, the difference is that Iran is, is a mighty, mighty nation with a very high level of education, a very high level of oil production, a massive global terror network, heavily embedded with the Chinese, with the Russians. This is not Venezuela. No, it isn't. And I think in his head, he simply thinks that the dominoes will fall. And that's not how geostrategy works.
No. Listen, let's take a very quick break and come back, because I'm very keen to talk about Tony Blair wading into the debate and the effect on Keir Starmer. Let's come back in a moment. Welcome back, dear listeners. So Tony Blair, at an event being interviewed by Robert Peston, said along the lines of, if your biggest ally is America, and if your defense relies on them being a cornerstone of your defense, well, then when they phone you up and say it's time to move, you better move. And we should have given access to Trump before the event to the air bases on the basis of just being shoulder to shoulder, etc., etc. Now, I don't know what you think, but my take on that was, if I was Keir Starmer sitting there listening to Tony Blair publicly espouse that we should tread softly, but towards a situation that looks and smells even remotely close to the previous Gulf War, then that's a great moment for Keir Starmer to demonstrate some difference and some strength and say, no, Tony Blair, you've completely got this wrong. And if he did that, he could have a massive, I mean, obviously this isn't about, there's much bigger things going on than Keir Starmer's immediate political future. But the Parliamentary Labour Party would love him for it. And a lot of the country would admire him for it, for saying, look, there are two men here who are basically moral pariahs in the public's mind, whether that's right or wrong. But I'm on the opposite side to the way they're thinking.
Yes, I mean, I think Yvette Cooper came quite close on the Laura Kuenssberg show within the sort of parameters of intra-party diplomacy. I think, that Blair's confusing two different points. Can have a legitimate discussion, although it's becoming ever more academic, about whether or not Starmer should have let the Americans use the UK bases in the initial strikes. I mean, as I say, it's in the rearview mirror, and I think it gets Jesuitical just arguing about it. But the point he made which is pretty much, I mean, I don't paraphrase very much, which is when the American president calls you and says jump, you ask how high. That's not, I mean, even the stronger, I mean, there is no stronger advocate of the special relationship than Margaret Thatcher, right? And she was more than capable, particularly over the Grenada invasion in 1983, of saying, no, you did that, that's wrong.
Yeah, so, and over the Falklands match, Reagan didn't want her to do that. She was like, "Screw you, mate." Yeah.
Yes. So the idea that I mean, I'm not baffled, but I'm dismayed by Blair saying this, because the notion that you can't have the special, basically he's saying that we have to be the 51st state.
Yeah.
Okay, that's ridiculous. I mean, the Prime Minister of the day has to have the right to say, you know, again, park whether or not Starmer was right, okay? Because the really important point about Blair's intervention is he's saying that the Prime Minister has to yield to the President of the day, which is ridiculous, because, of course, there are going to be different situations for the country. There are going to be crazy presidents. There's one at the moment. You know, you can't make it a kind of absolute ironclad duty if whoever's in number 10 to say yes to the president. That's silly. I think it shows no lack of judgment on Blair's part.
Totally contrary to, you know, we've seen the Daily Mail saying, you know, splashing yesterday, the Mail on Sunday, you know, this stinging rebuke to flailing Starmer. We've had what I describe as this Brexit flag shagger, Daniel Hannan, saying, you know, this is the most embarrassing, humiliating moment in Britain's history since the fall of Singapore. Right.
No, that's silliness.
You know, but what my interest is now, I mean, obviously that's just deranged flag shagging nonsense. But where I'm really interested in is on a purely domestic level, and actually probably quite an inside baseball level. But Starmer, who by common consensus, and I think we are totally aligned with this consensus, is basically screwed when it comes to after May. If he gets battered in the May local elections, then the party will be saying, we've got 2.5 years, the clock's ticking, you've got to exit left and make way for somebody who can beat Nigel Farage and or Zach Palensky. But now he has a moment here where I think he could carry the public with him on this, and he could get a lot of empathy from people saying, well, thank God, at last, a British Prime Minister is saying, no, we're not in a rush to go and repeat the mistakes of the Gulf War.
I think that's right. Although I think you have to, the question that Yvette Cooper couldn't answer yesterday when Laura Kuenssberg posed it serially and correctly is, are we at war?
Right.
Because as much as I hear you, and I think that some people will think good on you, Keir, you know, and I understand that. If this goes on much longer, by necessity and rightly, UK defence forces are going to be more and more involved in just safeguarding UK interests. I mean, you know, without shifting away from Starmer's position on offensiveness. Now, so all I'm saying is, and it was clear from, and I was trading some blows with people on X yesterday because I was puzzled by people marching against the UK government in Whitehall over the weekend, because it seemed to me that, you know, I understand their position and I totally stand for their right to march. But I'm puzzled that they think Starmer has done wrong.
Yeah,
and they were very
totally
angry.
Agree.
And they were very angry, but a very angry pushback, which was, no, he shouldn't even let America use the bases. And I said, well, but it's to defend UK citizens. No. So all I'm saying is that what we in the inside baseball way that we see Starmer as he is distancing himself from Trump in some very important ways, that may become less and less apparent as UK jets are flying over the Gulf. That's all.
So Matt, I completely agree with that analysis, and I was reminded very, very much because during the Gulf War, I was working on the Daily Mirror, right in the heart of the Mirror newsroom, and Mirror. Yeah. People may not remember this, but the Mirror was
right at the heart
absolutely of it. Absolutely right on the front line about saying stop this war. And in fact, when that magnificent 1 million-person march happened in London, many of those people were carrying Daily Mirror placards saying stop the war. Now, the mistake the Mirror made was the minute we were at war, we carried on saying this is a disgrace. This is you stop it, and we were seen as treacherous, right? We were seen as somehow not backing our armed forces and lost a lot of sail.
Yeah.
After that, a tide definitely turned, and I think a tide will turn here as well if that's what happens. If
Well,
we're dragged
yeah.
into it through no fault of our own, but because we become part of the attacked, then
Yes.
then Keir Starmer absolutely has to act and has to act with as much strength as he possibly can
Yes.
muster. But until then, I think there's a window now, and the window may stay open for the duration. There's a window now where he can be seen as doing de minimis in defence of British interests only, and not being part of an encouragement of the conflagration, the widening of this.
Yes.
And that would be a great position for a British Prime Minister to be, I think.
The question is, does he have the ability to spell it out?
Correct.
Because
correct.
one of the weaknesses of, I think, the first days of the war was that he stood there like a bunny in the headlights talking about international law. Now, actually, what it, so to speak, plays in these situations is not. I mean, it's perfectly fine to appeal to international law, and he's, knows more about it than any of us. But what will, as it were, enhance his standing, if indeed that happens, is if he talks in plain language.
Correct.
And he came quite close in PMQs in one of his answers last week, saying, I don't think there's a viable plan, and I don't think you can sort of bomb people into regime change, words to that effect. But to achieve what you're saying, he has to make the daylight clear. And the problem is that what happened over the weekend, Trump did one of his crazy Truth Social posts saying, we don't need you, thanks very much, we've won the war already. I mean, deranged.
Yeah.
Then Trump clearly under some pressure, to kind of not destroy the special relationship at all, because America does still depend on the Five Eyes intelligence network to a considerable extent. I mean, there is an American side to this. So he and Starmer have a 20-minute conversation yesterday, and you can bet, I'm afraid to say, that the next thing Starmer says about Trump will be ironic and peacemaking.
Yeah.
You watch.
Well, listen, I've just written a quick piece on it this morning because I woke up convinced that, having thought about it yesterday, I woke up really sure that if Starmer had really smart PR people around him, they would be screaming at him, here's your chance. Here is your chance to bring a lot of the British public with you on an issue that they really care about. And I say in this piece, I think we'll find out soon enough either on Truth Social with a tweet saying Britain's not that bad after all. Or,
I spoke to Keir Churchill Starmer yesterday.
That's right. So Winston Starmer.
Starmer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what my fear is. But, if he does have a little bit of Hugh Grant in him and he stands up and he says something about sovereignty that you all cried for. You all cried the Daily Bloody Mail.
That's a good way of framing it.
Dananan, you all cried for British sovereignty. What did you think it meant? Did it mean subservience to the United States, not to the European Union? Was that what your version of sovereignty was? Well, that's not what I'm about,
I mean, it's silliness. You have to, even if, up until Trump, I was madly pro-social relationship and also quite hawkish, but you have to have a cutout switch. Yes. There has to be provision made for when there's a maniac in the White House.
Yeah. Otherwise, we are the 51st state.
Yes, I mean, otherwise it's the reverse of what happened in the American Revolution. We have no say in who's in charge of us, which is absurd.
Right. Good moment to flag up two pieces of yours. One is the piece on the American Revolution that you've filed and is online now about the Ken Burns documentary, which I cannot wait to see, but I'm going to have to wait, aren't I? Because it's not out in the UK for a little while, is it?
Well, I might possibly have a DVD.
You might have a Blu-ray DVD. I'll have to buy a Blu-ray machine. I might do. It sounds that great. But the second piece is the one you filed this morning, where we probably haven't got time to get into it. We might return to it on Thursday, but about what is going on in Trump's head. And we've mentioned the word dynasty a couple of times.
Yes.
And now, tell me your theory.
Well, in brief, I mean, I wouldn't pretend this is the whole explanation, but I think to understand that what Trump is up to generally, it helps to see him as a dynast. And it was put to me by someone who knows the Trump family very well that there's a key difference between Trump and Rupert Murdoch, which is that Trump loves his kids. Now, I'm not saying he's a model father. I'm sure he was very absent, but he's not a Logan Roy figure. He doesn't enjoy watching his kids dance on hot plates trying to impress him. And there is genuine fondness there. Now, why does this matter? Before everyone reaches for their sick bag, it matters because a very powerful man who loves his children is more dangerous than a man who doesn't. Right. And if you look at, the real thing is the colossal enrichment of the family since the second inauguration last January. I mean, it's very conservatively estimated to be $4 billion by the New Yorker, and they say they've just to be on the safe side, they've cut out all sorts of things. And I think that what you are seeing, and it doesn't mean, by the way, that this is a good idea, but it's just trying to understand what Trump is doing across the board, domestic and foreign. He is trying to set up a dynasty, an imperial dynasty, which may or may not always be expressing itself through elective office, but has power all over the world. And the Board of Peace is part of this, and ICE is part of this, and his policies in the Middle East are part of this. Now, of course, what he may end up doing in this war is destroying, the stability that his family's commercial interests in the Gulf area and the Middle East more generally depend upon. Nonetheless, I think if you're putting Trump on the couch, which is always a good idea in these things, and because I think he just doesn't submit to the conventional tools of political analysis. Yeah. It's always wise to look at other things. And this, I think the dynastic aspect to him is one of them. I mean, the twist, of course, now is that with the younger Khamenei as supreme leader, it's a war between two dynasties.
That's right. It's such a fascinating parallel. And I think, if you look at it, well, could the opposite be true? And you look at the way that he has groomed Barron in particular, I think. Obviously, but it would seem impossible that he doesn't look at Barron as a future president of the United States.
Yes, but what's interesting, and I couldn't get everything into the piece because I looked around quite a lot. But there's genuine fondness between him and his children. I mean, yeah, I know it's difficult to say because Trump is such a hate figure, and I don't want to appear to be sympathizing with him. I'm just, trying to look at him psychologically. For example, at the Charlie Kirk Memorial last September in Arizona, Don Jr. gave a speech. And Don Jr. is a sort of firebrand, even more dialed up as an entertainer than his father. And in this speech, he did an impression of Trump in front of 70,000 foaming MAGA supporters. And they loved it. Yeah. And more to the point, Trump loved it. Yeah. Now, Lachlan Murdoch would never do that in front of Murdoch.
Well, funnily enough, I can interject here with an anecdote that I was once in the presence of James Murdoch, who did in Abu Dhabi. I was there at some I can't even remember what I was there for. Some conference, some digital conference, and Murdoch was giving the keynote speech, and they held a sort of soiree where it was Fox Cinema was revealing its new roster of films, absolutely terrible films, Trains on a Snake and stuff like that, awful stuff. And Murdoch, I was stood right next to Rupert Murdoch, who just continued chatting all the way through these announcements of these, and our next great movie, this, that, and the other. And James came over and said, "Dad, shut up," right? And Rupert went, "Oh, sorry, son," and was quiet.
Well, there you go.
But I think the fact that James was willing to confront his father like that was his doom. But you're absolutely right in the point you make.
Yeah, and these atrocious. They all write books, all of them unreadable, right? They're all sitting in my MAGA room, kind of molding. But what's interesting is they all have forwards from Trump Senior, in block capital letters. "You're doing an incredible job, Eric." I'm not clearly a massively weird, dysfunctional, and terrible family, right? I'm not saying this is the ideal, but. And I think, by the way, you're right that he's madly keen on Barron. Yeah. The Barron, who looks, let's be honest, quite like a very, very tall version of a well-known German leader, right? Once he starts shaving, and anything is possible, right? Right. He's 20 in 11 days.
Is he really?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means you can run for president in the 2044 election.
Well, we'll be long gone by then.
If there is one.
If
there is one.
Yeah.
If there is an election in 2044.
We can but hope we don't make it that far. Right, listen, thank you,
we'll
dear
be back.
listeners. Thank you for joining us on this Monday morning. It's been a great pleasure. We love to get this stuff off our chest. So
yeah, definitely.
Thanks for listening and tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday. I would love
if
to
not
hear
before.
From you. Yeah, well, crikey, who knows? Who knows? We might well be back. That would be a record, 4 in a week. But
I don't rule it out.
We live in historic times, so who knows? Thank you for listening to us. If you haven't subscribed to The New World, go to thenewworld.co.uk/2Matts, and there's a great offer waiting for you there, and you'll love the magazine and you'll love our website. Go and check the website out. You can see everything that's on it, and ask yourself, would my life be better supporting this kind of fiercely independent journalism? And the answer is a resounding yes, folks. It costs next to bugger all, so go and do that. Please. Send in your emails to yeah, that wasn't a directive, it was a request.
I don't know.
Send in your emails to 2matts@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2 MATTS tnepublishing.com. Or thanks as ever, especially on this Monday morning bright and early, to the third Matt Withers for producing the show. And until Thursday at the latest,
have a great week.
Have a great week.